Anyway, today we have Ed Hajduk, and he is the superintendent of the Cemetery of Alleghenies. Now, you know, if you've never been there, you need to go and ride through that place. It's immaculate. Very well run. I don't know whether I want to live there anytime soon, but it's a nice place. But who can go there, who owns it, and some of the other details about it, I asked Ed to come and explain that to us, since if you like it, you could make friends with him. He'll give you a special place there. Ed, it's all yours.
Thank you, sir. Morning, gentlemen. My name is Ed Hajduk. As Jerry said, I'm the director of the National Cemetery of the Alleghenies. Before we start, I'm just going to give you a little history about myself. I am a Navy veteran. I spent 6 years on active duty. I got out in 1986, and then I joined the reserves, spent 22 years in the reserves. I was recalled to active duty twice, once in 2001, right after 9/11, and once again in 2006. I'm originally from Chicago. I started with the Department of Veterans Affairs in 2014 at Abraham Lincoln National Cemetery. That's about an hour south of Chicago. I was a cemetery representative out there. A year later, I put in for and was selected for the Director Intern Program. That's out in Jefferson Barracks National Cemetery in St. Louis, Missouri. I spent 11 months there training to be a director for a national cemetery. In August of 2016, I was assigned as the assistant director at the National Cemetery of the Alleghenies. In September of 2019, my director retired. I was appointed acting director until they found a permanent director. And then in December of 2019, I was selected as the 4th director of the National Cemetery of the Alleghenies. It is an extreme honor and privilege to serve as a director. I have an outstanding crew. I have 16 personnel, including myself. I have 10 out in the field, 10 caretakers, and 5 additional administrative staff. 75% of my staff are veterans. So we have a very high veteran population throughout the National Cemetery Administration. So before we do our, I have a PowerPoint program. It takes about 45 minutes to an hour, depending on how much I talk. But before I start, we're going to watch a video. It's called The Sacred Trust. And it gives you a little idea of what we do as a national cemetery prior to I start my, my PowerPoint program.
For all who visit, a national cemetery is an awe-inspiring experience. The final resting place place for over 3 million American heroes. This is hallowed ground, where we honor the service and sacrifice of our nation's veterans. The National Cemetery System began when Congress authorized President Lincoln to purchase cemetery grounds for casualties of the Civil War. Since then, veterans from every era and every conflict have been buried in more than 130 national cemeteries across the country. All honorably discharged veterans and their dependents are eligible for a burial at no cost to the veteran's family, as well as a burial flag, headstone or marker, and presidential memorial certificate. With that burial comes a commitment to maintain every grave in every cemetery forever as a national shrine. To our veterans and their families, from a grateful nation, this is our sacred trust to you. Murphy's son, Lieutenant Michael Murphy, was killed in action in June 2005. He was a Navy SEAL and the first recipient of the Medal of Honor in the war in Afghanistan.
We wanted Michael buried here because I knew Calverton. My parents are buried here, and I knew the people who operated it, and I knew the care and dedication that they put into it.
A vast majority of the employees here are veterans themselves. They served our country. They look at it as serving, again, being able to help people at what may be the toughest time of their life.
It's not only a job, but it's a devotion, a way in which to honor those that have sacrificed in defense of this nation. And so I couldn't think of a more fitting place to put my son, a hero, in this cemetery.
Groundskeeper Bill McNaughton is an Army veteran and retired NYPD officer. Each day he visits the grave of his son James, also an NYPD officer, and an Army Reserve Staff Sergeant. James was killed in Iraq in 2005.
I think almost 30 active duty here from Afghanistan and Iraq. To me, all these guys, they're here with people who understand this sacrifice. They all understand. We all understand.
Marsaw served 19 years in the U.S. Army. He now works at historic Natchez National Cemetery in Mississippi.
Everybody here is like a family to me, and I believe in treating my family well. And, everybody that's here, we want to make sure that when their loved ones come to visit them, we want them to be comfortable. We want, the overall appearance to be great.
My mom, my parents, my brother, my uncles are all buried in a national cemetery in St. Louis, and I remember how I was treated when I came there with my loved ones, and I try to do the same thing when families come into our cemetery, because we want them to feel that this is home and we're here to take care of them.
One frequent visitor is Albin Burdix, a veteran of the Korean War.
I visit my wife's gravesite traditionally once a week. It's close, easy access for me. It's peaceful, it's quiet. It's a great place to come for solitude and, of course, the memory of my wife.
Visitors to any national cemetery can't help but notice the special care taken of the markers and grounds, part of NCA's commitment to maintain them in perpetuity as national shrines.
It gives me great pleasure personally to know that when I pass on, that I will be interred here with my wife under these most beautiful conditions, without the necessity of family members having to come and to maintain the place or to discuss conditions with the management, knowing full well in my heart today that I will always be treated with dignity as having been a veteran, and that my wife has already had that same pleasure accorded to her. Love you and miss you, sweetie. Bye.
NCA understands that the death of a loved one can be one of the most difficult times in life. One way we try to help is by simplifying the process of arranging the funeral.
We make it generally very easy. There's no complicated forms, there's no waiting period, there's no complex eligibility criteria. If you have a copy of your discharge, that's all we need, and we take it from there in a matter of hours.
Furthering our commitment commitment to veterans and their families, NCA has embarked on one of the largest expansion efforts in its storied history. The South Florida National Cemetery is one of 7 new cemeteries opening by 2009 to serve our nation's veterans.
Today, we are doing our dedication program. There are over 400,000 veterans in this area that we will serve with this cemetery. My job as a director and job of the staff is to provide an honorable and dignified burial for the family.
Today, Kim Reka has brought her children to visit the grave of their father, Christopher, a Vietnam veteran who was killed in the line of duty as a police officer in 2007.
There were about 5,000 people that came to the cemetery. And as my younger son, Spencer, referred to it, it was a service that was fit for a king. He served his country and his community for most of his adult life. It was wonderful that he was honored. And the cemetery, they did a beautiful job. Everything just went so smoothly. It was beautiful.
I want to make sure that when they arrive here, everything goes according to plan. We treat each and every service as if it was the only one we ever did.
Burial services are provided for both casketed and cremated remains. Many cemeteries also provide interment above ground in columbaria. Military honors are performed upon request by 2-person teams from the Department of Defense. Some cemeteries, like Minnesota's Fort Snelling National Cemetery, use volunteer rifle squads.
During our service, we first of all recognize the entrance of the deceased onto the shelter. Right after that, we fire the rifles. Following that, taps, and then the folding of the flag, if it's necessary to fold the flag, and the presentation of the flag to the family.
And they place it in the hands of the widow, and you just kind of clutch it to yourself, you know, because that's the symbol of what they did for this country.
50,940 funerals we have provided service for. The weather has never been a factor. We are out here every day of the week, and that's the way we work.
And they were older veterans themselves doing the shooting, and it was like they almost had a tear in their eye.
Well, yeah,
because they're honoring one of their own, you know.
I say a prayer for all of them here, but it's so peaceful and so beautiful. When I pass, I'll be right here with Wally.
We take care of our own.
The National Cemetery Administration honors veterans with a final resting place that commemorates their service to our nation. All national cemeteries are maintained in perpetuity as national shrines. This service is provided at no cost to veterans and their dependents. For more information, visit our website at www.cem.va.gov. And thank you for your service.
All right, gentlemen, a show of hands. How many veterans do I have here? All right, thank you for your service. Those of you who joined the finest Navy organization in the world, I applaud you. Thank you very much. And those of you who are in Marines, Army, and Air Force, okay, thank you very much. I'm sorry, I'm a Navy veteran, so I do have a love for the Navy. But no, seriously, I do thank you for all your service. I know it's, especially when you're away from home, you're overseas. My first time overseas, it was strange, because I never left Chicago. So my first time overseas, my first Westpac, it was exciting, and also it was kind of, well, I hate to say it, I was 20 years old, so it was kind of emotional. Other than that, I want to thank everybody for the service, and those who has relatives or family members who are veterans, this goes out to all of you, so thank you. Let me get this started. Okay, again, my name is Ed Hajduk. I am the director of the National Cemetery of the Alleghenies. National Cemetery of the Alleghenies is part of the National Cemetery Administration, and the National Cemetery Administration is part of the Department of Veterans Affairs. Our Honorable Dennis McDonough, he is the Secretary of the Veterans Affairs, and the Honorable Matthew T. Quinn, he is the Undersecretary of Memorial Affairs. He oversees the National Cemetery Administration. The Department of Veterans Affairs, there are 3 agencies with one common goal, but 3 different missions. The common goal for the Department of Veterans Affairs, is to care for him who shall have borne the battle and for his widow and his orphan. That was President Abraham Lincoln's solemn promise to our veterans during the Civil War. The 3 different missions is we have the Veterans Health Administration that takes care of our VA hospitals, our clinics, and our veterans throughout the nation and across the world. Our Veterans Benefits Administration, that's for our pensions, for your education. And then there's the National Cemetery Administration, which takes care of internments and the Veterans Legacy Memorial. The mission of NCA, our mission is to honor veterans and their families with final resting places in national shrines and with lasting tributes that commemorate their service and sacrifice to our nation. That is our mission. And the purpose of NCA is to provide the burial for their veteran and their dependents, to maintain the national cemeteries as national shrines, to administer federal grant programs to state cemeteries and to tribal cemeteries, to furnish headstones, markers, niche covers to veterans and their family members, and to administer the Presidential Memorial Certificate Program. National cemeteries. As I said, national cemeteries are national shrines for the burial of our nation's veterans, dependents, and their children. When they set up a national cemetery, what NCA will do is they'll pick an area, and they will look at a 75-mile radius from that area. So in the case of the National Cemetery of the Alleghenies, they went to Bridgeville, and they drew a 75-mile radius from Bridgeville. So that covers southwestern Pennsylvania, parts of Ohio, parts of West Virginia, and Maryland. Currently, there's 323,000 veterans in that 75-mile radius. Okay, so that's how we figure out, or that's how NCA figures out where to place the cemetery. The Morgan family owned the farm, which is now the National Cemetery of the Alleghenies. It is split up into 2 sections. We have the south side and the north side. The north side of Morgan Road is currently the cemetery that we are using. We have approximately 21,000 veterans and dependents interred at the National Cemetery as of this time. When the north side becomes full, we will then proceed to the south side of Morgan Road and complete the actual cemetery, or the expansion of that cemetery. Any eligible person may be interred at any national cemetery. Just because we live in southwestern Pennsylvania does not mean you have to be interred here at the National Cemetery of the Alleghenies. If you decide to retire down in Florida or Arizona, you can be interred there. If you move down there and you decide you want to come back up to Pittsburgh or up to southwestern Pennsylvania and be interred here, as long as there's space available for either cremation or casket, you would be eligible, you and your family. Unfortunately, the cost of transportation, if you were to move out of state, would be on the family. So who is eligible to be interred at a national cemetery? So that's any member of active duty, so any armed force member who was killed while on active duty. Any veteran who is discharged, now here's the caveat, who is on active duty other than training. So in other words, if you're a reservist on AT, annual training, and that's all you did, you would not be eligible. And you would have to be other than dishonorable discharge. So if you had an honorable discharge or other than honorable discharge, you would be, not an OTA, excuse me, a honorable discharge and discharge under honorable conditions. If you had an OTH, other than honorable, or a bad conduct discharge or dishonorable discharge, eligibility would have to confer to be sure if you would indeed be eligible. Now, for enlisted personnel, prior to September 7th, 1980, all you needed was 1 day of active duty. After September 7th, now this is for enlisted, after September 7th, 1980, the member would need to have served 24 consecutive months. That's on active duty. Or be a retired reservist or National Guard, so you have to do your 20 years in the reserves and then get your letter that says you're eligible to be retired. Or you are a reservist or National Guard who was recalled to active duty by executive order. Executive order is by the President of the United States. National Guard who are recalled by the governor of the state would not be eligible. Okay, so those National Guardmen who are recalled for the hurricanes down south, if they were recalled by the governor, they would not be eligible unless they served on active duty prior to going into the National Guards. Now, for officers in the military, prior to October 16th, 1981, you just needed 1 day of active service. After October 16th, 1981, the same applies, 24 consecutive months. Now, those who are recalled, if you were a reservist and you were recalled for, say, 9 months or a year, you would have to serve the full 9 months to 1 year, whatever the orders were, to be eligible to be interred, unless you were discharged early for either medical or hardship discharge, and that'd be on a case-by-case basis. Okay, now spouses, minor children, and in some cases, adult dependent children are also eligible to be interred at a national cemetery. Now, the definition of a spouse is one who they were married in a church or in a justice of the peace after January 1st, well, I take that back, hold on, who were married in a church or justice of the peace. Common law spouses, the state of Pennsylvania recognizes common law spouses prior to January 1st, 2005. So if you lived with your spouse and you went throughout your town, and you introduced each other as husband and wife or husband and spouse, then you would then and then you would have to fill out the paperwork that says we were common law. And you would need some documentation that says you were common law. And that would be like if you had a joint bank account, if you paid the bills together, if your names were on the mortgage together, something that showed that you two were together prior to January 1st, 2005. You would also need to have 2 witnesses that would sign an affidavit that says, yes, these two are common law. So if someone was a common law spouse, they would have those forms to fill out. Now, minor children in the eyes of the National Cemetery Administration are children under the age of 21 or under the age of 23 while pursuing a higher level of education. So in the event you had a 22-year-old daughter who got involved in a car accident and she was at a college and she was killed, she would be eligible because she's over 21, but she was still attending a higher level of education. Now, in some cases, adult-dependent children are also eligible. Now, an adult-dependent children is a child who, prior to the age of 21 or 23 if attending a higher level of education, became physically, mentally, or emotionally handicapped, where the child had to be dependent on the parents for living. If the child was born with a handicap and they had a history of that, we would need documentation from the family and from a medical provider that stated that this person was disabled and it relied on the family. Now, in some cases, the adult dependent child might be in a halfway home or a home for dependent children. That does not exclude them for being interred. But each adult dependent case is sent up to eligibility, and it's on a case-by-case basis. Any questions before we continue? Okay, order of death does not precede interment. So the veteran does not have to be deceased first. The spouse or the minor child could go before them. There are no reservations at the National Cemetery. It is next available spot. So we have casketed sites, we have in-ground cremation sites, and then we have above-ground columbaria. So it would be next available spot depending on what the family would want for their loved one. We encourage everyone here to discuss their wishes with their family members, with their spouse, their siblings, their children, or their neighbors. To let them know this is what I would like, whether it's a casket or a cremation. Now, when it comes to interments at a national cemetery, when it comes to caskets, there are two options with caskets. You can, of course, the casket purchase is on the family, but it is a government liner is provided for the casket. If the family chooses to go with the government liner, then the family would be interred in the next, in this case, it would be Section 14. The family also has the choice to purchase a private vault. Again, that would be on the family to purchase the private vault. If the family decided to go with the private vault and not with a government liner, then they would go into Section 2. Section 2 is the section we use for private vaults. If the veteran or the family member is cremated, then the family has to decide, do I want in-ground cremation or do I want above-ground cremation? So there's something you would need to discuss with your family on how you want to be remembered. The most important thing, as you saw in the video, is your discharge papers. That's all we need. Now, other information such as war periods, awards you might have gotten, Purple Heart, Bronze Star, that should be on your DD 214. But sometimes they cannot find their DD 214. Some of the information, if you're in the VHA system, we can go through VBA to find some of the records, or we have to go through the National Cemetery Scheduling Office if you don't have military records on hand. So your burial benefits, what's included in the burial benefits? So we have the grave site, the opening and closing of the grave site, the grave liner, and this is for caskets only. There are no grave liners for in-ground cremations. So we have the headstone, niche cover, or marker. Now, markers are for flat markers. We don't have flat markers at the National Cemetery. We just have headstones or niche covers. Okay, so, and this also includes the inscription on the niche cover or headstone. A perpetual care of the gravesite, a medallion. Now, a medallion are for privately purchased headstones at private cemeteries. Some families, their veterans are not interred at a national cemetery. Their loved ones are at a private cemetery and they have a private marker. The family can then order a medallion from the Department of the Veterans Affairs, and this medallion would be affixed to the private headstone that shows everybody that this individual was a veteran of the armed forces. You have the U.S. burial flag. Now, the U.S. burial flag either comes through the Veterans Benefits Administration or through the United States Post Office. We encourage, if you're going through a funeral home director, the funeral home director knows the process inside and out. They've been doing this for years, so they know exactly what they have to do. If you decide to have your loved one cremated, or if you decide to be cremated, but you're not going to be interred right away, you can hold on to your ashes until your spouse passes, and then you both want to be interred together, you can do that as well. Now, the Presidential Memorial Certificate, that's administered through the Memorial Program Services, and then also the funeral honors. Now, funeral honors is through DOD, Department of Defense. Now, DOD, that is by Congress. Congress has initiated that every veteran is entitled to military honors. Two-person team from the military, only one person has to be from the branch of service. So in my case, being that I'm a Navy vet, I can have a Navy and a Marine at my service, and then the Navy would present the flag to my loved ones. But that is the minimum. Right now, they say between 2- and 3-person team. Right now is what the DOD is sending. Now, if you're retired, sometimes they send more, but that's on what is going on, because we're limited with the number of personnel for DOD honors. And they just don't do their national cemetery, they do DOD honors throughout the 75-mile radius at private cemeteries and at national cemeteries as well. There's 2 other national cemeteries close by to the National Cemetery over the Alleghenies. We have the West Virginia National Cemetery, which is about 90 miles south of here. And then we have the Ohio Western National Cemetery, and that's about an hour south of Cleveland. Now, there's the Indiantown Gap National Cemetery by Harrisburg, but that's a little bit further away. Okay, I says military funeral honors. It's DOD's responsibility, and I said 2 armed first personnel, and then I get 1 from the Veterans Branch of Service. They will fold the flag. Now, on caskets, we all know that the casket is draped on the flag. With cremations, the flag is pre-folded, and the flag is placed on the cremation table next to the cremation urn. And then at the time of presentation, they will unfold the flag, refold it, and then present it to the next of kin. And then they have the sounding of taps. Now, DOD needs 48 hours notification. Anything less than that, they cannot guarantee that they will have honors. Now, sometimes, depending on your faith, some faiths require the interment to be done within 24 hours of passing. So sometimes it's hard to get DOD in that such short a time. In cases like that, we can always reschedule military honors on another date. So we can have the interment, we can have the service, the committal service at our shelter, but then we can have DOD honors at another time, if they didn't do DOD honors at the funeral home or at the cemetery. And then we also have VSO groups. Veteran service organizations. We have VFWs and American Legions. Right now we have about 16 different organizations that volunteer their time to come out and present military honors. Now, with DOD will actually fold the flag and present the flag. The VSO groups, they actually perform the rifle volleys. Now, everybody thinks it's a 21-gun salute. That's not correct. It's 3 rifle volleys. Duty, honor, country. And the reason for that is sometimes we only get 3 members of the rifle detail. Sometimes we get 5. We try to make it an odd number, 3, 5, or 7. And only the President of the United States and heads of state are authorized 21-gun salute. The Presidential Memorial Certificate. Now, this was initiated by President Kennedy back in 1962. It is issued to every veteran, even if you're not buried at a national cemetery. Okay? And it's presented to the next of kin. And it is signed by the current administration. So if you had a loved one who was interred, say, during Bush's administration or during Carter's administration, it would be signed by the current administration, just so people are aware of that. The veteran medallion that I talked about, Basically, this is what it looks like. There's 3 sizes. There's a 5-inch, a 3-inch, and an 1.5 inches. And it's based on the size of the marker that the family has. And as you can see, it's bronze. And up on top, it's got the flag in the center. And then up on top, it says veteran. And then below it says the branch of service that your loved one served in. So that is something that you can request if you have family member, but this is only for those after November 1st, 1990. So if you had a veteran that passed before that, would not be eligible for that bronze star or the medallion. So what happens at time of need? Well, depending on what you're going to do, you're going to definitely get a hold of a funeral home. Because if you're going to have a casket or cremation, the funeral home has got to be involved in either one. Okay? The funeral home or family will then contact the National Cemetery Scheduling Office. They're out of St. Louis, Missouri. The NCSO is the central hub for the United States. So all national cemeteries communicate with NCSO, and then from there it goes out to the national cemeteries. So sometimes there's a long waiting period, could be as long as an hour before a representative from the scheduling office contacts, or you might be on hold for that 1 hour until they actually get a hold of you. Right now, the scheduling office is having a high demand of calls. And what we're thinking is because last year, a lot of people who were cremated were put on hold. So they didn't want to be interred because we had so many restrictions at our national cemetery. We only would allow so many people to attend services during fiscal year 2020 or during 2020. So now we're seeing a higher than normal volume of interments for 21. So the NCSO, or the scheduling office, will verify eligibility, and then the case is then transferred to us. So we'll receive the case, and then within 2 hours of us receiving the case, we'll be contacting the funeral home or the families to verify all the information that you gave the scheduling office. So you're going to call the scheduling offices, and you're going to give them all the information. Casket, cremation, where you want, service, no service, all that information you're going to give the scheduling office, and then we're going to do the same thing all over again. And the reason for that is trust but verify. We want to make sure that we have everything correct. We don't want no surprises on the day of the interment. You know, somehow, and this has happened, the family or the funeral home that says, you know, it's a casket and burial, so we're getting ready for casket burial, and they'll show up with a cremation urn. So, yeah, it's like, whoa, time out. So we verify everything just to be sure. And then the day before, we'll call and verify again. We want to make sure that the family, if they contacted military, is the military going to be there? Did they contact an honor guard? If so, who? So we know who's coming out here. Because we like to make sure that there's no surprises. Okay, and then the funeral home will arrange, or the family will arrange military honors and clergy. So what happens when you arrive at the National Cemetery? Oh, for those of you who've been to the National Cemetery, when you pull in, you'll pull into the Public Information Center. There's a sign that says funeral processions to the right, and then there's a phone. Either the funeral home director or the next of kin will get out, pick up the phone, and it automatically calls the administration building. We then pick it up, and it's every half hour. So every 30 minutes we have a service coming through. So right now we're doing 10 services a day. That's the max we can do. So the cemetery representative will then come up to the Public Information Center, meet with the family, explain what's going to happen, and then escort the family up to the committal shelter. The committal shelter is where the service will be held. There are no gravesite services. We do not honor at the gravesite, because since we're doing so many, we just don't have the time to actually have gravesite services. And then after military honors are presented, we ask that the family leaves so we can prepare the shelter for the next service. And the interment is then private. So the family can come back later that day after the burial has been done to visit their loved one. Usually that's after 4 o'clock. And now, now we do have what we call family viewing or roadside. And for those families who do not want to have a committal service, they can actually have a roadside, where what it is the family will pull up on the road, but they'll stay in their car. And they'll watch the interment from the road. But they won't have military honors and they won't have a committal service. And again, they would have to come later after 4 o'clock to visit their loved one. Okay, when we talk about headstones and niche covers. Now a headstone, it's 42 inches tall and weighs 240 pounds. 24 to 26 inches are above ground and the rest is in ground. So, and it's actually 3 to 4 inches wide. 3 or 4 inches depending on which national cemetery you're at. We have marble headstones at the National Cemetery, and we get them from 3 different quarries. So one headstone might be completely white, one might be gray, and one might be a mixed match of veining. Some families love the veining because it's very unique. Other families like the plain white headstone. We have no rhyme or reason on how it comes in. It comes in on pallets, and we just offload one after another, and the next one, and the next one, so we don't reserve a headstone. So if the family wants a pure white headstone, we don't offer that. We just offer the next available headstone. Now, prior to 2009, the black ink you see on this example is called lithochrome. Prior to 2009, the National Cemetery Administration authorized lithochrome. That's the black ink that you see on the marble headstones or niche covers. The problem with that is that over time, the lithochrome fades. And there's a multiple of reasons of why. Could be the weather. Was the stone wet? Was it raining that day? Is it too hot, too cold? Was the batch ink, was it too wet, too dry? I mean, there's so many variables. Did he not apply it correctly? So the National Cemetery just said, we're going to stop. We're going to stop doing lithochrome. So all new national cemeteries after 2009, non-lithochrome. Now, if you go to our national cemetery, you'll see some older sections that started in 2005 have lithochrome, and then in 2009, they transferred over to non-lithochrome. That's why you see some sections with the black ink and other sections that look like it's a blank headstone until you go up and then you see the actual inscription. So on a headstone, you have this religious emblem. Now, there are 78 different emblems of belief that the family can choose from. The family will get the information on the different emblems. It's basically a 2-page sheet that shows all the different emblems of belief. The most common one is the Latin Christian cross. That's the most common one that we see out in the National Cemetery. But you don't have to have an emblem of belief if you don't want one. That's just an option the family has. Then you have your first name, middle initial, and then the last name. Then you have the rank, branch of service, war period, date of birth, date of death, any medals that are applicable, and then you get 2 lines of inscription. Now, 2 lines are 15 characters. So what that means is every letter is a character, every space is a character. So if you want, in this case, in our hearts, so you have what, 11 letters, plus 2 spaces, which is 13. And then below that, you'd have another 15 characters, but that's it. Some older cemeteries or different cemeteries have 3, but we just do 2. And that's the way we're going to keep it. We're going to keep it at 2 lines of inscription. That's for headstones. Now for niche covers, it's a little bit different. It's the same format, the same basic information, but we start with the last name. So we start with the emblem of belief, the last name, first name, middle initial. Then we have the rank and branch of service on the same line. And then we have the war period and medals. Then we have the date or year of birth, year of death, not the date. Whereas in the headstone, you actually have month, date, year. On niche covers, you just have the actual year of birth, year of death. And then if there was a spouse, the spouse would be then just first name, middle initial, and then the spouse's year of birth and then year of death. And which niche covers, you get 3 lines of inscription, but they're shorter lines. So it's 13, the first 2 are 13 lines, and the last one is 9 lines. And the reason for the last one being 9 is we have 4 rosettes that hold the niche cover to the columbarium wall. That last line, if you were to have 13, the rosettes would cover the lettering, so we have to keep it at 9. Yes, sir?
What's a niche cover?
A niche cover, at the columbarium wall, if in the video you saw the columbarium wall, it's a cover. It's a 20-inch by 12-inch cover that goes over the niche. And the actual cremation is in the columbaria. Yes. Yes, sir.
Okay, you've got the war period.
Yes.
I had a mix of active duty and of reserve time. When I was on active duty, there was no war going on at that time.
Right.
There was a war at times when I was in the reserves. I was not activated. Is it only if you're activated on active duty that you would put in the war period?
Yes, sir. If you were basically, now you don't have to be in country. So if you're on active duty, so if those who served during the Vietnam conflict or the Vietnam War, even if you were in Germany or stateside, you would still have Vietnam on that, on the on the headstone or niche cover.
What if you had 2 different wars?
We would have that. We've had 3 different war periods. We have had World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. And then we've had multiple awards. The problem with that is the more you add on top, the less you have for inscription. So the family has to decide what they would like to have. Now, there's only 4 things that are mandatory on a headstone, and that is the name, branch of service, date of birth, date of death. That's the only thing that's mandatory. So everything else is optional. But we try to maintain that format, so when you look down the headstones, everything is the same. We're all brothers and sisters in the military, and we're all at attention in our sections. So.
Question.
Yes, sir.
I was in the Merchant Marine during the Vietnam War. I couldn't get in the military, but I wanted to serve. So I worked for the Military Sea Transportation Service. I was on a troop transport for 3 months, submarine supply ship for 22 months, and I was an engineering officer on a reefer cargo taking food to troops in Europe for 10 months. So I wouldn't be able to...
We would have to check with eligibility, because I know Merchant Marines during World War II were eligible. I'm not sure. I'd have to find out what it is for during the Vietnam conflict.
I found out years ago that I could be eligible for military benefits, but since I'm on Social Security, I got a small pension. I feel I would dishonor the combat soldier by doing that. But since you brought this up, I thought I'd just ask.
No, sir, we could definitely check that out. I mean, you served your country. So, yes, we would definitely check it out. But I don't want to give you the wrong information, so I would need to verify with the scheduling with eligibility.
I'll look into it.
Roger that, sir. Okay, pre-need application. There's some confusion. I don't know if some of you have heard of pre-need. Pre-need basically is you apply to make sure you're eligible to be interred at a national cemetery. In your case, sir, you can do pre-need application. And then what happens is you fill out the forms, you either mail it or fax it in, and then you would get a letter back 60 to 90 days that says whether you are or are not eligible to be interred at a national cemetery. So basically that's what it is. And all it does is it gives the family peace of mind knowing that, yes, my loved one can be interred at a national cemetery. It doesn't reserve a space. It doesn't reserve a location. All right, so this started back in 2016, and this allows, again, the family to verify that you are eligible. And I do have forms in the back for those who are interested in filling them out. But it eliminates the delay for going through the eligibility, because that letter you received that says you are eligible, it's in the file. At time of need, though, when you're actually, the interment is going to happen, we're going to have to re-verify all the information again, only because there are 2 cases where you can be denied even though you served honorably. And one is if you were convicted of a capital crime or a sexual crime that the veteran was sentenced to life in prison without parole or the death penalty. There have been cases where a veteran has killed his spouse and then killed himself, and the veteran was barred from burial at a national cemetery. So we do have to verify, and unfortunately, we have to verify in today's society. We want to be sure that those who are interred in national shrines deserve to be there. So how that works is there's a VA form 40-10007. Both you and your spouse, and if you have an adult dependent child, would have to fill each one. So each one would have to fill this out, and then they would send it in to the National Scheduling Office. Then, like I said, you would receive written notice of eligibility and keep that copy. And then if you were denied, the letter would give you a right to appeal. So it would tell you if you were denied, if you want to appeal it, you can. And then the VA stores that information, and then at time of need, as I said, we re-verify the information. Okay, and we send it to the National Cemetery Scheduling Office, and that's the mailing address and the fax number. Now, the National Cemetery Scheduling Office is open 7 days a week from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., excluding 362 days a week. They're closed Christmas, New Year's, and Thanksgiving. Okay, the National Cemetery of the Alleghenies, we opened, our first burial was August 15th, 2005, and then it was dedicated October 9th, 2005. Okay, like I said, we have 16 employees at the National Cemetery. Yeah, thank you, sir. 10 are field staff, 6 administrative. As I said, 75% are veterans. We have 292 total acres, 90 are developed. We have, as of the end of August, 21,025 interments. Right now, at the end of August, for fiscal year 21, we're at 1,803. And then our projected dates, or the projected totals, is 1,982 for the end of September. Burials are approximately 36 a week, and 55% cremation, 45% casket. And then of the cremation, 60% is in the columbarium, 40% is in ground. Okay, casket and cremation, those are your options. Like I said, casket, it's either in the vault or it's in the private vault. That's on the family. And then in-ground columbaria. There is no closure date. We just tell people greater than 2060 because we're going to be here for a while. Interments are Monday through Friday, 30-minute services. So it starts on the half hour, it ends on the half, or starts on the hour or half hour, ends 30 minutes later. And then we ask the families, again, to actually exit the committal service so we can get ready for the next one. So technically, it's 30 minutes from, sorry, do you have a question?
Yeah, we're going to have, we need to find out if there's any questions.
Oh.
Because they're going to wind up at 11.
Oh, gotcha. Oh, my goodness. Okay.
Are there any questions? Okay, question. Hold on.
Question here. What if
one spouse wants to have a casket and the other spouse wants to be cremated?
That's not a problem. What happens is, if it's the casketed burial first, then the cremation would go in the casketed site. If it's a cremation first, we would do the cremation, we would do the in-ground interment or in the columbaria, and then when there's a casket burial, we would disinter from the columbaria and reinter with the veteran in the casket site. So they're always going to be together.
I thought the answer was going to be you have to be divorced.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, what, cemeteries usually have rules on flowers and stuff.
Yes, sir.
What are your rules?
Our rules are fresh flowers around the year. Once they become discolored or eaten by our local population, then we dispose of them. Artificial flowers are allowed in the off-growing season, which is October 10th through April 15th. Artificial flowers only. Now, during the growing season, artificial flowers are allowed during Easter and Memorial Day, 10 days prior and 10 days after, at which time we then remove them. Okay, and then stuff like glass, candles, pinwheels, balloons is not allowed. Nothing attached to the headstone. Anything that's attached, we will take it off. We've had jerseys put over headstones. We've had pictures stuck to coins. Well, the coins we will leave because we'll just put them down on the ground. But when they sit on top of the headstone, they become discolored and damages the stone. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
You mentioned something about the medallion.
Yes, sir.
When my father passed away, he was a World War II veteran. And the local VA hospital, I filled out a form, and they had a bronze plaque.
Okay.
At the base of his gravesite.
Yes.
Now, maybe some people don't know about that. They're available, right?
Yes, you can have both a private marker and the bronze plaque as well.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Anybody else?
Yes, sir.
Quick question. In the case that you mentioned where a man killed his wife and killed himself, he may have suffered greatly and more.
Understand that, sir.
And so I don't understand why he would be eliminated and not around because,
It's his mind. I understand that, sir. Unfortunately, those are the rules that we have to follow. Now, the family does have a right to appeal, but because he took a human life, because he murdered somebody, he would not be, or he or she would not be allowed.
Anybody else?
Yes, sir.
The rules are set by Congress.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes.
So they're clear.
Yeah, we don't make the rules, we just follow them. Okay, and just real quick, I just want to let you know that we do have an expansion program going on. 13,754 more grave sites are being added. So every red dot that you see on this map are new grave sites that are being put in.
Last question.
Yes, sir.
What's your website?
Website, www.cem.va.gov. And then, yeah, www.cem.va.gov. And then from there, you can go to all of our national cemeteries. I did leave brochures on our national cemetery on the table, so please help yourself. And I also left information on burials, on the PMC, the Presidential Memorial Certificate, the medallion, and other information. So.
Any other questions?